Evolution is scientifically impossible. Those who believe in it do so based on religious faith. Unfortunately, the worldview that results from that religion has led to more death, destruction, cruelty, injustice, and oppression than any other religion in history. And we'll talk about it on this episode of Genesis, Back to the Beginning, on Faith by Reason. Welcome to Faith by Reason. The website behind it all is faithbyreason.net. There you will find hundreds of hours of study material, blogs, podcasts, and videos. And if you become a member of Faith by Reason, you will get access to the entire 60-episode Revelation series, as well as this Genesis series and other bonus information. Also, I encourage you to become a Patreon of Faith by Reason by going to patreon.com/faithbyreason. And as a Patreon, in addition to the Revelation series and the Genesis series, you also get bonus content. You get content before anyone else sees it. All my content drops first on Patreon, as well as Q&A videos that I put up weekly. And you also can be a part of the monthly Bible study where we go through the entire Bible in 12 months based on this supernatural worldview. So you see everything from the spiritual point of view, which is 80% of the Bible. So most Bible studies miss that. You also get discounts or free books. And we are continuing our short series on evolution. This is part 2 of evolution. Part 1, which hopefully you saw last time, shows how evolution is impossible. Not unlikely, not improbable, impossible. Not based on the Bible, but just based on empirical science, the science that real scientists use. Evolution does not meet any of those tenets. It's a ridiculous, ludicrous fairy tale. We went over that in detail, so I'm not going to belabor that point. What we're going to talk about this week is the result of people who believe in evolution. Because if you believe in it, you're not believing in it based on facts. You're believing in it based on faith. You cannot prove it. It is impossible to prove. It is ridiculously, unimaginably impossible. And if you saw the last episode, you will understand why. Yet, if you choose to believe it, and many people do, they are doing it based on faith. And whatever you do based on faith is your religion. And you have a right to believe whatever you want to believe in this country. So the problem with believing in evolution and the secular atheist worldview that goes along with it is not so much of what you believe, but the results of that belief, the effects of that belief. If evolution is the cause, then the worldview of Darwinism is the effect, and that effect has been horrific on this world. Evolution has resulted in more death, destruction, mayhem, injustice, oppression, as I said before, than any other religion that has ever existed. Folks who are on the secular side like to accuse religion of being the source of all the world's problems, of wars, of oppression. And yeah, there have been many religions, even some that have claimed to be Christian religions, that have caused a lot of destruction. But nothing in the history of the world has come close to what evolution and the religion of Darwinism has wrought in this world. Eugenics, genocide, ethnic cleansing, millions, hundreds of millions of people have died due to this religion, and we're going to expose it on this episode. So like the last episode, after this introduction, I'm just going to dovetail into a podcast that I did previously on the religion of Darwinism, and there'll be some visuals and videos and things like that to keep you engaged, and since it's going to be audio only. And also, like the last episode, I'm going to make this episode available for free to all the social media feeds on YouTube and X and Rumble, because I want to make sure that the people who will be affected by this most, our friends, the atheists, will be able to see it. And just like before, I'm not going to respond to any of your comments because, as I said last time, I don't like getting into arguments with religious fanatics, and you atheists are extremely religious people, and you can't get through to religious people with facts and with anything like that. So I'm not going to get engaged with you. But what I will do is what I promised last time, and that is I'm going to give you a gift. After the podcast, I'm going to come back afterwards and wrap things up, and I'm going to give you a gift. And that gift I'm going to give you is the gift of freedom. You see, you atheists don't want to be here. You don't want to be listening to me. You don't want to listen to any Christians. You don't like us. You don't like the God that we worship. You don't think he exists. And yet you're here because you troll sites that talk about evolution and creation and get into pointless arguments with us. And you don't know why. You are driven here virtually against your will by a force greater than you. And I don't mean God. That force that's greater than you is a force that is inside you, that is bigger than you and is forcing you to be here and driving you here against your will. And you are in bondage to it. And the gift I'm going to give you is the gift of freedom. I am going to give you 3 ways to be free of the force that is guiding you here and that is driving you here so that you can be free. It's going to be wonderful. So just wait till the end of the episode and you will see that. So without further ado, let's get into Darwinism, the deadliest religion on earth. What is the philosophy of Darwinian evolution, and why is it the most dangerous and deadliest religion in the history of the world? We'll talk about that on this week's episode of the Faith by Reason podcast. Welcome to the podcast. The website behind it all, as always, is faithbyreason.net. There you will find the blog, you will find our social media, our archives, tons of information, and of course you will find this very podcast. So we are still on the series of what's the point? What's the point of existence? What is the meaning of life? And in the last few podcasts, we've been talking about how existence came into existence. The first 2 podcasts, we talked about creation. We talked about the physics behind creation. Then we talked about what the Bible says about creation. And then in the last podcast, because I'm such a generous, magnanimous person, I gave the opposing viewpoint, which is that of evolution, the idea that there was no creator behind the first cause, that the universe came into existence naturally, and everything that we see, hear, smell, see, and touch, all life came into existence by random chance and accident. And we saw in that podcast definitively that that idea of natural evolution is impossible, not improbable, not unlikely, impossible, scientifically impossible, impossible by astronomical magnitudes. It can't happen. So if you believe in evolution, you believe in it based on faith. And if you believe in it based on faith, anything you believe in based on faith is a religion. And that's what evolution is. It's a religion. And in this podcast, we're going to explore the philosophy, the religious philosophy of evolution. And we will see why it is, as I said earlier, dangerous and deadly. Well, before we get there, I want to address some of the comments that I got on the last podcast. I was expecting some colorful comments, and I got them. Most of them, again, unfortunately, through email. And I wish folks would stop emailing me and would actually put their comments into the comments section. It would be much more beneficial for everyone to see the comments. So please give me your comments on the website, on Facebook, on Twitter, but stop emailing me. And most of the comments aren't worth addressing. A lot of them were just name calling from some of my atheist listeners, and it's pretty much what I expected. Atheists tend to reduce themselves to childish name calling when things don't go their way, and that's okay. In fact, I appreciate it because the surest sign that the attacker is losing an argument is when they resort to ad hominem attacks, when they attack the person instead of the message. So when you resort to calling me names, that's just a tacit admission that I'm right and you're wrong. So thank you for that. But unfortunately, name-calling ceased to be an effective counter-debate measure to me in about 4th grade, so sorry, you're kind of out of luck there. I also got a few comments saying that my science was off or that my science was wrong, but none of the people who commented that way ever said exactly what was wrong with the science. They just said it was wrong, and that's not very helpful, so don't do that. If you're going to say I'm wrong, tell me how I'm wrong, and I can look into it and try to correct it if possible. One comment I did get that I want to address is someone took me to task for me saying that only low-level scientists believe in evolution and high-level scientists don't. And that person said that Neil deGrasse Tyson, he is a high-level scientist and he promotes evolution all the time. And I agree that Neil deGrasse Tyson does seem to be a pretty prominent scientist. He seems to be a high-level scientist, but he's also the current spokesman for scientism. He's the scientific establishment's talking head of the moment. He's everywhere. He's in social media. He's on regular media. Anytime anyone has a science issue in the news, you will see him pop up and talk about it. And while, again, I will say he's a high-level scientist, he's not exactly unbiased. Again, he's a spokesperson. His job is to toe the company line, and the company line for the scientific establishment is that evolution is true. So of course he's going to say that. And then the guy brought up Bill Nye, the science guy. He's the one who's always these days debating creationists, and he obviously believes in evolution. And Bill Nye, I guess his basic claim to fame is that his last name rhymes with guy. So I suppose if he was a car mechanic, he'd be Bill Nye, the car fixing guy. And I used to like the guy when I was a kid and I watched his show. It was actually, pretty helpful in science for kids. But now in his later years, he's devolved into an old, bitter, grizzled attack dog for evolution against creation. And so I guess whenever the establishment wants to debate a creationist, they pull Bill Nye out of his coffin and they have him go up there. And he's basically the evolutionary version of the old man on his front porch yelling at you to get off his lawn. So I'm sorry, I don't take him seriously either. Anyway, that's enough of those the comments. Let's get into what we want to talk about today, which is the philosophy of Darwinism. And the best way to start this conversation is let's look at Charles Darwin. So what do we know about old Chuck Darwin? Well, Charles Darwin was a naturalist and a geologist in the 1800s. And he took a famous voyage on the HMS Beagle. I don't know why they named a boat after a dog, but so be it. It was an around-the-world journey where he stopped in several places around the world and he observed the wildlife there, and he took his notes in it so that he could make his observations, write his observations down and compile them later. And one of his stops was in the Galapagos Islands. And while he was on the Galapagos Islands, among the other species he noted there were finches, these birds called finches. And these finches, he noticed on different islands, had different characteristics, especially in their beaks. There on certain islands you had finches that had long, thin beaks. And those finches were able to more efficiently, or very efficiently, get bugs out of narrow places with those long, thin beaks. Then there were other islands where you had finches that had short, stout beaks, and those finches they primarily ate fruit, and they used their short, stout beaks to crack open coconuts and other types of fruit, and they were able to eat it pretty efficiently. And then on yet other islands, you had finches that had short, sharp beaks, and they were leaf eaters. And those short, sharp beaks helped them to better consume leaves. So these observations, among others, led Darwin to have an epiphany. He believed that all of these different types of finches, and there were 12 different varieties, they all had a common ancestor, a finch with just a regular old beak. But what would happen is that at some point in the past, this finch gave birth to a child, a little bird that was different, that had a different sized beak. It was a mutant, and it had a long beak. And it turned out that this long-beaked finch was really, really good at getting insects because it had the long beak. It was much better than the normal beaked finches. And it reproduced and had more kids, and those kids had the same characteristics of the long beak. It passed that characteristic along genetically. And suddenly there was a population of finches that were really, really great at getting the bugs because of their long beaks. And they displaced the normal beaked finches because they took all the food. So the normal beaked finches died out because they were less fit than the long-beaked finches. And the same thing happened on the island where a normal beaked finch happened to have a kid that had the short, stout beak, and it was able to get the fruit better. And it reproduced and had more finches with the short, stout beaks, and they dominated, and the regular finches died off. And Darwin came up with his theory that the fittest of the species will always survive and thrive, but the less fit will die off. And that's how the species advanced. So what Darwin did when he got back home, he looked at all of his notes and he expanded his theory to not just involve finches, but to involve all of life. All of life evolved from a common ancestor, the bacteria that we talked about in the last podcast. And as it mutated, one of these mutations led to advantages in the species, and those species that had the advantage, they were more fit. And survival of the fittest means that they survived and they bred, while the ones who did not have that fitness died off. And that's really the basis of Darwinian evolution. That species evolve. If the evolution is advantageous, they'll thrive and pass it on. If it's not advantageous, then they'll die off and they won't survive and thrive. So Darwin published his findings in his famous book called On the Origin of Species, and it became an instant spectacular hit during his time. All the scientists loved the idea because it gave them an explanation of how life could begin and evolve and thrive without any type of supernaturalism at all. It gave a reason for them to justify their naturalism. Now, they believed in naturalism before Darwin. They believed in atheistic, secular origin of the universe and life. But Darwin gave them an actual, seemingly viable theory to tie it all together. So Darwin was famous, and he still is to this day famous. And again, it was a big hit in the scientific circles, and it's influenced everything in science, especially the science of biology, and even social science, all the way up to this day. But the question is it true? Is it real science? Is it empirical? And the answer, like with everything with evolution, is no, it's not. And I was actually going to spend some time going step by step and showing why his process of evolution is unscientific, but that would take away from what I really want to get into, which is the philosophy. So I'll just suffice it to say that it's not empirically true for a few reasons, and I'll give a few of those reasons right now. And one of them is, again, there's no evidence. That is the biggest challenge to Darwinism, is there is no evidence of any animal evolving from one species to another. Now, I want to quickly differentiate between micro and macro evolution. Microevolution, I don't even like calling it microevolution because it's not really evolution. It's actually variation within the species. What that really is that you'll have one species that will have different genetic characteristics. For example, dogs. Dogs are a single species. They're canines. And they all had a common ancestor, a wolf. But you also have these dogs expressed as something as variable as a Doberman Pinscher versus a Chihuahua versus a Great Dane. These are very different looking dogs. They have different physical characteristics, but they're all the same species. They didn't evolve from one species to another. They're just variation within that one single species. That's not the evolution that bothers Christians or bothers people who don't believe in Darwinian evolution. The one that we have a problem with is called macroevolution. That says that one species changes into another. That's the idea that we went from a single cell bacteria to a fish, to an amphibian, to a reptile, to birds, to mammals, to monkeys, to man. That's macroevolution. That's where the problem is. No one has a problem with microevolution. No Christian or any other religious type person has a problem with the idea of there being a variation within species. That's scientific. We can see that. The problem is the idea that one species becomes another species, and there is no evidence of that at all. It's not empirical. There is not a single animal that you can see on Earth today that is in a transition state. Every animal we've ever seen, ever observed, is fully, completely functioning as that animal. It is not slowly growing an appendage to become another animal. You don't have some land animal it has like partially formed gills, so because it's becoming a sea animal, or vice versa. We don't see that. So not only do we not see it in contemporary science, we also don't see it in the fossil record. And there should be, if Darwin is correct and evolution takes millions of years, we should see tons and tons of fossils of animals with partially forming appendages or whatever, slowly transforming into another animal. But we don't see any. There is no animal in the fossil record. Scientists are still looking for it. They call it the missing link. You know why they call it the missing link? Because it's missing. They are looking for links between species, and they have never, ever found one. Once in a while, they'll come out with the fossil that they initially say, oh, this is a transition species, but then it turns out that that's either an incomplete fossil or it's just a fossil of a fully formed animal of a species that has died off. So there is no evidence, no empirical evidence of it. And Darwin himself said that if the fossil record did not jibe with what his theory said, then the theory should be thrown out. And it doesn't, but people have not thrown out his theory because it's way more convenient to the secularists to keep his theory going, than to admit that it's wrong, which it obviously is. Furthermore, we know that mutations, which are key to evolution, are never beneficial. Mutations are always harmful. They are always accidents, and they are always harmful. You see, whenever any cell replicates, there is a protein that runs along the strand of the DNA checking for errors. And so that mutations are very, very rare. The only time they happen is if that protein doesn't do its job well and there's an accident. A mutation is always an accident, and it's always a bad accident. It is never beneficial. And sometimes you will see animals that are mutated, but they're never beneficial. For example, last year I saw an article about a sheep that had a fifth leg. That's a mutation. It's not supposed to be that way. That's a mistake. But that five-legged sheep was not faster than other sheep. That fifth leg didn't give it any advantage. It was actually a hindrance. It was a useless appendage. And if that sheep was in the wild, it would have quickly died. The only reason it survived as long as it did was because it was under the care of a farmer who took care of it. Otherwise, that animal would have died. There is no evidence of a beneficial mutation. It never happens. There are always accidents, and there are always bad accidents. And generally, if that animal is able to reproduce, its offspring will not have that mutation because the DNA is an error correcting code. It corrects its own errors. So mutations are not beneficial. And so macroevolution can't happen. It's as impossible as any other part of evolution. And I'm not going to spend any more time on the physical part of this, because we saw in the last podcast, you can't even get to a protein by random chance, let alone a single-celled organism, let alone complex life, let alone fish to monkey to man. You can't get there. It's impossible. So we're going to get away from that, and we're going to talk about the philosophy of Darwinism. That's what's most important, or what's most important to us on this podcast. So what is the philosophy? Well, if you look at what Darwinian evolution really says, if you look at the idea that everything is happened naturally through random chance, then everything you see, all life you see, is nothing more than a random accident. That means we, human beings, we are nothing more than a result of a series of cosmic accidents. You are not special, according to Darwin. There is nothing special about you. You are not made in the image of God or any transcendent creator. You don't have a soul. You don't have a spirit. You are nothing but an animal. You are a highly evolved animal, but an animal nonetheless. Your life is not valuable. Your life is no more valuable than that of a cow or a chicken or a pig or a horse or a cockroach. Your life means nothing. If you're a Darwinian evolutionist, then the answer to the question of what's the point is there is no point. How can an accident have a point? It doesn't. You have no purpose other than to reproduce and just keep the species going. You have no higher purpose at all. And that is truly tragic. And that is one of the biggest tragedies of the Darwinian philosophy, is that human beings are not special. Our lives mean nothing. So according to Darwinian philosophy, the only, purpose, for lack of a better word, that we have as a species would be to keep the species evolving. So what we would want to do is make sure that the fittest of our species keep going and that the unfit of our species die off. That's really our only meta level responsibility. But that leads to some big problems. And I think one of the biggest problems, I think you can probably see pretty easily that this leads to, is something called racism. So if there are members of the species that are more superior than others and others are inferior, and we human beings tend to categorize our physical differences, unfortunately, along racial lines, then that means that, according to Darwin, there are some races that are superior to others and others that are inferior. And that's what racism is all about. And this isn't just me speculating. Darwin himself, in his second book, which is not quite as famous as Origin of Species, but it's as impactful, if not more so, especially on our social world, is called The Descent of Man. And in The Descent of Man, Darwin makes no bones about the fact that he does not consider people who are savages to be worthy of continuing on in the human species. And who does he consider savages? Why, anyone who's not European, especially since he's European. And stick a pin in that. We're going to get to that in a second. But he also thinks that any human being that has a weakness does not deserve to continue on. If you have a mental illness, if you are not very smart, if you are infirmed in any way, you should be gotten rid of. And he takes to task charitable people and insane asylums and welfare that helps out people who are not quite as fit, people who are mentally disabled, physically disabled. And because he says all you're doing is prolonging the inferior people in the species, and we shouldn't do that. We need to make sure that only the fit survive and reproduce. Darwin sounds like a pretty awesome guy, doesn't he? And of course, that naturally leads to racism, where people think that one race or one group of races are better than another group of races. And here's where I want to get back to the whole savages thing, where anyone who's not a European is a savage. Have you ever noticed there's something very interesting about racists, and that is that racists always think that they happen to belong to the superior race. Have you noticed that? Whenever someone says, well, there is racial superiority, they just happen to, by sheer luck and circumstance, belong to that superior race. If you're white, then if you're a white racist, then you think that white people are the superior race. If you're a black racist, you think that black people are the superior race. If you're an Asian racist, you think that Asians are the superior race. You just happen to have belonged to that superior race. Aren't you lucky? You never see it happen the other way around. You never see a white racist say, well, you know what, there's a superior race and it's those Asians. You never see that. It's always the race you happen to belong to. And aren't you just lucky for that great coincidence to have happened? And racism is so stupid. I mean, if you're a racist, you're someone who believes that you are superior because you happen to fall out of your mother's womb, not because you accomplished anything, but because people who look like you accomplished something. I mean, I've heard black racists say that because darker skinned people are the ones who built the pyramids and invented mathematics and astronomy, that darker skinned people are the superior race. Well, wait, just because someone else invented something and you look like them, that doesn't transfer to you. I mean, the person who designed the first pyramid, he was brilliant. Maybe he or she was was mentally superior, and whoever invented mathematics, if they be they dark skinned or not, I guess I could argue that they had a mental superiority. But how does that transfer to you? It doesn't. And I would hear white racists say that, white people, we invented all the modern conveniences of society, that Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. Yeah, Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. What does it have to do with you? You're a truck driver in Indiana. How does that transfer to you? I would dare say that a black kid who's an engineer at MIT has much more in common with Thomas Edison than a white guy driving a truck in the Midwest. Racism is stupid. But the biggest problem with racism is not the mentality behind it, but actually the physical acts that go along with it, such as oppression, denial of rights. This country, America, has a long and sad history of treating minorities horribly because of racism. And then when you extrapolate it onto a larger scale, you have things like ethnic cleansings. And I hate the term ethnic cleansing. It sounds like you get a bar of soap and you're washing down ethnic people. No, ethnic cleansing is mass murder of people who don't look like you, and that is just horrifying. And it's grown exponentially since the adoption of Darwinian philosophy. And you have areas like Chechnya and Darfur and Sudan and places in Africa and all over the world where people are being ethnically cleansed simply because of the way they were born. And that's just crazy. It's cruel, it's inhuman, but it's one of the fruits of Darwinism. But I can argue that social Darwinism is in a way even worse than the physical traits that people use to differentiate each other and pit one race or group against each other. Social Darwinism doesn't just say that the inferiority or superiority is based on physical stuff. It actually says that where you are in society makes you worthy or not worthy of life. Whether you're smart or dumb or rich or poor, that designates whether you're fit to survive, or even the philosophy you have. As an example, a few years ago, I was out at happy hour with some coworkers, and one of the coworkers, who was an atheist, he was starting to drink, and he started talking about religion. Isn't it funny how atheists always want to talk about religion? Very interesting. Anyway, I didn't bring it up. He brought it up. I was just wanted to enjoy my beer, but he wanted to talk about religion, and he said that religion, that's the biggest problem in the world because religion is the reason behind all the wars and conflicts in the world. I'm like, oh my God, that's such a galactically stupid statement. Most wars are not fought over religion. Most wars are fought over conquest. One country or group of people is trying to conquer another group of people, and that's why wars are fought. So I gave him a little quiz. I said, you know what? World War I, 20 million people dead. What religion was it fought over? Oh, well, it wasn't fought over religion. Yeah, I know. Let's try another one. World War II, 50 million people killed. What religion was that fought over? Oh, yeah, well, World War II wasn't fought over religion. Yeah, I know. Good job. The communist revolutions in Russia and China, conservatively speaking, 80 million people slaughtered. And we know they weren't fought over religion. They were actually atheistic. Communism is atheistic. And they killed almost 100 million people. That's more than all so-called religious wars combined. So I told him I could actually make an argument that atheism is the cause of more destruction and mass murder in the world than religion. And he didn't have anything else to say about that. He just went back to his drink. But the point is that communism is a philosophy. It's an atheistic philosophy. And because it's atheistic, they believe that it's perfectly okay to kill and slaughter any one who does not toe the line and does not go along with the idea of the communist utopia. And that's exactly what happened under Stalin and Mao. They slaughtered millions of people. That's one of the fruits of social Darwinism. Another is the way that poor people are treated. Because according to social Darwinism, poor people are inferior. If they weren't, they wouldn't be poor, now would they? And because of that, poor people get the short end of the stick. They live in areas that are the least desirable. People feel perfectly justified in building nuclear power plants and power lines and trash dumps near where poor people live. Why? Because who cares about them? They're poor. They're not fit. The fit people are the rich people. They get to live in the good areas and have the good stuff. I will say personally, I grew up quite poor. I remember going to the supermarket, going to the produce section and seeing the produce, which was in bad shape. It was wilted and there were flies around. And honestly, I thought that's just how vegetables were. When vegetables came to the supermarket, they just weren't in good shape. And, later on after I went to college, got my education and started working and gained some level of affluence, and I moved into a more affluent area. And I went to the same grocery store chain, and I noticed something very different. Again, same chain of grocery stores. I went to the produce section in the affluent area, and the produce was beautiful. It was shining, vibrant, healthy. Why? Again, it's the same store, but they treat the produce in the rich areas, the affluent areas, much better than they treat that in the poor area. Why? That's subconscious social Darwinism, treating the poor worse, oppressing them, denying them opportunities because they don't socially fit in. So why should they be healthy and continue to reproduce and just produce more of these inferior poor people in the world? Horrifying, but another fruit of Darwinism. And I'll give you another one, abortion. I'm not going to get into the politics of abortion. I'm not interested in that right now. What I want to get into is the prominent abortion organization in this country, Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood was started by a woman named Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger was a virulent racist and a eugenist. She believed in racial superiority, and since she was white, guess which race she thought was superior? I'll let you think about that. But she believed that abortion was a way to eliminate inferior races. She called them human weeds. And I'm not making this up. You can Google Margaret Sanger and human weeds, and you will see all her quotes about what she felt about people who are not white, particularly black and brown people. And she saw Planned Parenthood as a way to eliminate these inferior races. That's why she put Planned Parenthood and planned to have Planned Parenthood clinics in poor and minority neighborhoods to get rid of them. And that's why I find it very interesting and very funny that the political party in this country that claims to be on the side of minorities virulently supports Planned Parenthood. In fact, one of our most recent former president, who is African American, well, more or less, technically an African American, is the descendant of African slaves, and this president was not. He's a son of a native Kenyan man and a Caucasian woman, but whatever, he's a minority. He's on record as saying, "God bless Planned Parenthood," ignorantly unaware that if Margaret Sanger had her way, Planned Parenthood would have had him killed before he ever came out of his mother's womb. Yet God bless Planned Parenthood. Moronic. But again, that's the fruit of Darwinian philosophy. So for all you snide atheists out there who are always complaining about religion and saying all the horrible things that religion does, well, your religion, atheism, Darwinian philosophy, the fruit of your religion, the things that your religion condones is racism, oppression, mass murder, genocide, oppression of poor people, denial of rights. That's the fruit of your religion. That's what you're all about. That's what your religion condones, supports, and advocates in order that the fit survive. That's your religion. So sleep on that. And there we go. That is your religion, Darwinist, secularist. Your religion is horrifying. So hopefully this knocks you off your high horse and you believe you're so superior intellectually and morally than the Christians and the Muslims and the Hindus who've done all these horrible things throughout history. No, you've done worse. You're doing worse. And right now your religion is responsible for so much death and destruction and genocide and euthanasia and racism. Yeah, especially the racism aspect, because when you believe that there is survival of the fittest and that human beings are no different than an ant or a cockroach or a rat or any other vermin, that we're all the result of a bunch of cosmic accidents and that our lives have no value, then you can perfectly justify killing and exterminating a bunch of human beings you believe are unfit, the same way you can justify getting rid of a bunch of termites who are eating your house. Because after all, life has no meaning. We're just a bunch of accidents. Therefore, you can perfectly justify killing people who don't look like you, who don't have the value that you think other human beings have, and are not as fit as you. And again, that's where racism comes in. And so, yes, your religion is racist, it's genocidal, and you are responsible for killing many, many people. Whenever you hear someone use certain euphemistic terms like population control or population reduction or birth control, they're just finding a very nice way to say, we want to kill millions and billions of people. And Darwinism and evolutionary Darwinism is the only religion that advocates for the indiscriminate killing of hundreds of millions, if not billions, of human beings in order for your religion to be right, in order for only the fit to survive. That is horrific. That's your religion. And you can justify it all you want, but that's really what it's all about. It's about killing massive numbers of people. And your religion is the only one that advocates that. So you're not superior. You're actually the worst religion that has ever existed. Isn't that wonderful? But enough of that. I promised you in the last couple of episodes that I would give you a gift. I would give a gift to the atheists and unbelievers who are here. And I'm going to give you the gift of freedom, the gift that will free you from the mad desire that drives you to engage with Christians and with believers in God and to get into pointless arguments with them and waste your very precious time arguing and reading about and discussing and watching movies about the God or gods that you claim you don't even believe exist, because you shouldn't be here. There is no reason for you to be here, to be wasting your precious time talking about a God that doesn't exist, listening to someone talk about a God that you don't believe is real, yet you are here. Why? You don't know why. I'm going to explain why you're here, and I'm going to explain how you can be free of it so you can live the remainder of your life no longer being driven to Christian sites and Christian broadcasts, Christian videos, and Christian books. Because you are driven here. I mean that seriously. You are literally being driven here by a force greater than you. And as I said before, I'm not talking about God. Yes, God is greater than you, but he is not the force that's driving you here. The force that's driving you here is your own mind. And I'm going to help you understand what that means. In the words of the character Morpheus from the great movie, The Matrix, let me tell you why you're here. See, I'm doing a Morpheus voice. You're here because you know something. What you know, you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is the feeling that has brought you to me. And in fact, it's the feeling that has brought you here. It is a splinter in your mind driving you mad. And your desire to get rid of that splinter, that discomfort that is making you angry, that's making you literally mad, angry mad, and insane mad, because it is insane for an atheist to spend any time discussing a God that's not there. Who obsesses over something that's not real? Just atheists. You're the only ones. It's insane. It's that splinter in your mind driving you mad, and I'm going to give you the cure. There are 3 ways to cure it. I'm going to give you all of them. But in order to do that, we need to take a step back and understand how your mind is working, or rather not working, so that you can know why you're here and how to resolve it. So I have a background in mental health. That's where I have my degrees, and I've worked with mental health organizations, and I've started some on my own, and I've gotten a really good understanding of the mind and brain. So let's start by dispelling a huge bit of pop psychology mythology. And that myth is the idea, you probably heard it before, that we human beings only use 10% of our brain. Not true. That is pseudoscience, just like evolution. It's pseudoscience. And like all pseudoscience, it's incorrect and it's based on fallacious understanding. We don't use just 10% of our brain. We use 100% of our brain. However, we're only in control of 10%. We are only in conscious control of 10% of our brain. The other 90% is on automatic. We call that our unconscious brain or our unconscious mind. And again, it is 90% of our brain. It is huge. It is 9 times larger than our conscious brain. Our unconscious controls the majority of what goes on in our minds and in our bodies, but they do it outside of our control. You're not in direct control of that 90%. Things like blinking your eye. You haven't thought about blinking your eye. You've been watching this video for the better part of an hour and your eyes have been blinking without your control. Your unconscious is doing that. Your heartbeat, your rate of breathing, your perspiration, all of those things are affected by external stimuli and your unconscious is in control of them. For example, let's say you go on a hike in the woods and you encounter a mountain lion or a bear. When you see that animal, you don't say, okay, heart, start beating faster, lungs fill with more oxygen, blood go to my extremities, pupils dilate. You don't do that. That happens automatically. That's your unconscious brain. It does it instantly and automatically based on reality. Your conscious brain, again, is 9 times bigger than your regular brain. It sees 9 times more. It has a much wider vision than your conscious brain. You can't take in all that information consciously. It would overwhelm you, but your unconscious is there in the background seeing it all and it sees reality. That's really important. So the best analogy I can give you is one that one of my friends and mentors gave me, and it's the car and driver analogy. And you see this on my friend's website, flocess.com, flocess.com. Highly recommend you go there. As an aside, it's a great way to find out who you are, what your motivations are, what your true personality is, beyond silly tests like Myers-Briggs and all the other so-called personality tests. This tells you who you are at your core and it tells you what motivates you and what your purpose in life is. So go to flocess.com. There's a quick test you can take there for free. It's really amazing. But anyway, what my friend talks about on Flowsess is what's called the car and driver model. It relates us to our mind and brain, helps you understand it. When you get into a car, you are in conscious control of only 10% of it. You know, the steering wheel, the brakes, the accelerator, the radio, the air conditioning, the windshield wipers, things like that. 90% of what makes that car function is happening behind the scenes that you don't have any direct control over. You know, the engine turning over, the pistons pumping, the spark plugs firing, the transmission fluid going, and the radiator regulating the heat of the vehicle. All those things are happening in the background, and they are massively more important to the car functioning than just you steering it and braking and accelerating. So just like a car, you're only in control of 10% of it. The rest, 90% is happening behind the scenes, but that's the true power behind the car. Your brain is the same way. You're in conscious control of 10% of it. The rest of it is going on behind the scenes. That is your unconscious. And as I said before, the purpose of your unconscious brain is to make you aware of reality. Your unconscious brain is all about reality. It does not see falsehood. Your unconscious brain is not moral. It doesn't see good and evil. It just sees right and wrong patterns, and those patterns are based on what you have taught it. You see, your unconscious brain is also your biggest fan, even though it's stronger than you. It's more powerful than you. It's 9 times stronger than you. So if you weigh 100 pounds, think of your unconscious brain as a 900-pound gorilla. If you weigh 200 pounds, it's an 1,800-pound elephant. You can't physically overpower it. It's more powerful than you, but the good news is that it's on your side. It wants to help you. It wants to protect you. It wants to give you what you claim you want. And it does that by following your patterns. It follows the patterns that you give it. So going back to the whole aspect of you hiking in the woods, and let's say there's out of the corner of your eye you can't really see because you're thinking of other things. You're listening to a podcast or having other thoughts. But your unconscious out of the corner of his eye sees that there's this danger, this bear, this mountain lion. What does it do? It wants to get your attention. It wants to make sure that you see reality. So if you do tilt your head that way, it's going to instantly make your heart beat faster. It's going to make your breath deeper so you have more oxygen. It's going to get blood to your extremities. It's going to make sure you go into fight or flight so that you're ready to react and save yourself. You don't do that automatically. Your unconscious does it, and it does it without any input from you. It can take over in those circumstances. And let's say a more benign circumstance. Let's say you are at a party and there's someone there who is attractive to you, and your unconscious knows they're attracted to you because you've taught it that. You have decided, well, this is the kind of person that I like. This is the man or woman that I like. There's certain height, certain weight, certain body type, facial features, voice, mannerisms. This is what I like. And your unconscious has seen who you've dated, and it says, okay, get it. I get it. This is who you like. So whenever we encounter someone with these aspects, even if they aren't overt, even if they aren't obvious, Your unconscious sees way more than you. When you are at a party and that person is there, your unconscious sees them instantly. And as soon as you're near them, you're going to feel a flush. The blood's going to rush to your face and to your genitalia. You're going to feel attracted to them. When you start talking to them, women, you're going to toss your hair. Guys, you're going to, get that intense stare. You're going to start flirting with them. Your heart's going to beat faster. Your breath is going to become more shallow because your unconscious mind is sending certain pleasure chemicals that are drawing you to this person. And you feel good when you're around them, which is another important point. Your unconscious communicates reality to you, but it doesn't do it through words. Your unconscious communicates to you through feelings, through chemical impulses that it puts in your brain that will make you feel good or scared or uncomfortable or uneasy based on the situation. I'm sure you've had a situation where you've been around a bunch of people and you encounter someone and they just make you feel off. You just say to yourself, there's something about that person I just don't like. Not because you know them or you've had a chance to talk to them. It's just something about them you don't like. Well, that's your unconscious following patterns. Let's say that this person has characteristics of someone you don't like. I had a situation where I was dating this girl in my 20s and we broke up. We had a really bad breakup. And I was very poorly disposed to her. I didn't like her anymore. And she had a certain tone in her voice. And to this day, if I ever hear someone with that tone, I don't like them. They may be a good person, but my unconscious knows that that's what I don't like. So whenever I hear someone with the tone of voice that my ex had, I'm repelled by them because in my unconscious has given me those chemicals that say you are not attracted to this person. You're repelled by this person. And when you walk into a room and someone makes you uneasy, it's because your unconscious has picked up cues from them that you've trained it to give. So because this person has characteristics you don't like. Someone else who you had not liked in the past has maybe looked like them or walked and talked or stood like them, had their posture, had their tone of voice, the way they tilt their head when they talk. You say, yeah, I just don't like them. And that's your unconscious making you aware of reality that this is a person who fits the description of someone who you don't like. Okay, so what does that have to do with evolution? What does that have to do with atheists and you guys being driven here? As I said, your unconscious loves reality. Your unconscious mind is a reality junkie and it wants to make you aware of reality. Your unconscious cannot lie to you. It does not recognize lies. Now, you're consciously, you can lie. You can lie to others consciously. You can lie to yourself consciously because lies are not reality. Your unconscious is not about lies. Your unconscious is about reality. And it drives you towards reality. So anything that is not reality, your unconscious is going to drive you away from it and drive you towards what's real. And again, your unconscious is your biggest fan. Your unconscious thinks the best of you. If you make a mistake, your unconscious assumes that it's an innocent mistake and it's trying to get you more towards reality. Again, how does that relate to evolution? Well, easy. Evolution isn't real. It's not true. We know it's not true. You listened to the last episode, and even though you rejected it consciously, your unconscious was in total agreement because your unconscious knows that life does not come from non-life. Your unconscious knows that one species of animal does not become another species of animal. Your unconscious knows that if we are all just the results of random accidents and life is meaningless, that you can justify immoral acts like genocide and euthanasia and ethnic cleansing and population reduction and eugenics. And it knows that that's wrong because it knows that that's immoral. Even though you consciously want to accept it, your unconscious knows the truth. Your unconscious knows, you unconsciously know that evolution is false. Now, you can believe it consciously, but your unconscious, which is 9 times bigger than you, knows that what you are believing is patently unreal and it doesn't like it. So what does it do? It tries to nudge you back towards reality. So every time you are talking to someone about evolution, every time you hear the word evolution, every time you read about it, every time you're talking to someone else about it, every time you're disparaging a Christian about it, your unconscious is there saying, you know, that's wrong. You know, that's not true. It's making you uncomfortable. It's sending those chemical signals in your brain that makes you uncomfortable. And it does it over and over again. But it does it a little gently at first because it believes in you. But then you just double down. You say, oh, I'm uncomfortable, but that's okay. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to just keep going because evolution has to be real. So your unconscious ramps it up a little bit because it believes, well, maybe he or she is just not getting it. So let me just make my poking a little more intense. So it pokes you and pokes you and pokes you. And you keep fighting against it, and it keeps poking, and you keep fighting, and the poking becomes more and more intense, and it starts to irritate you. What was just a gentle nudge, and you getting it all the time, that discomfort is starting to make you angry. It makes you uncomfortable. Here's the problem. You displace that discomfort. That discomfort that's starting to irritate you, that splinter in your mind that's driving you mad, you don't know where it's coming from. You don't recognize it's coming from your unconscious mind, your own brain. What you think is coming from are people like me. You think that the people who are making you angry, who are upsetting you, are Christians. So when you hear a Christian talking about the fact that we are the result of supernatural creation, that God spoke the world into existence, and it makes sense based on empirical science, based on quantum physics, and your unconscious says, you know he's right. You know he's right. You know he's right. You don't want to believe it, so you get angry, and your unconscious pokes you harder. You know it's right. You know it's right. A splinter in your brain driving you mad, and you start to get upset, and you think that your fight is against me and other Christians, and it's not. So what do? You want to make it go away. You want that splinter in your mind to stop driving you mad. And since you believe that your true enemy are people like me, other Christians, and other people who believe in the supernatural, you go after us. You want to make it go away. And you believe that if you can defeat a Christian like me, or anyone else you encounter, then that splinter in your mind that's driving you mad will stop, and you'll finally be free. So you go to websites, you go to YouTube channels, you go to Rumble channels, you go on social media, you go on X, and you get into fights with Christians because that's your enemy. That's what's driving you mad. That's what's making you crazy. That's what's making you so angry. That's that irrational anger that comes, that you think is coming from Christians being so stupid. So all you have to do is go to them and convince them that they're wrong. And let's say you succeed. Let's say you're a really good debater. Let's say you're very intelligent. And let's say the Christian that you're going against is a new Christian, or maybe they're not terribly bright, or maybe they're not a good debater, and you win the debate. You put forth a question or a supposition or a concept that they can't handle, that you put forth facts that they have no defense against. They're not good in apologetics. They don't know what people like me know. And you win the argument. Yay, you feel great. You get a dopamine hit from winning, and you think, okay, great. Finally, that splinter in my mind is going to stop. That poking is going to stop. Unfortunately for you, once that dopamine hit dies down and you come down from your euphoria, guess what's still happening? Poke, poke, poke. Your unconscious is still poking you, saying, you know you're wrong. You know you're wrong. You know life doesn't come from non-life. You know animals don't evolve. You know the earth isn't 4 billion years old. You know this is wrong. And you get angry again. So what do? Well, you go to another Christian website and you get into a fight with them. And let's say you win that fight. Yay, I won. And then the dopamine hit subsides and all those good feelings subside. And guess what still happens? Poke, poke, poke. Why? Because I'm not your enemy. Your enemy is your own unconscious brain. It is 9 times bigger than you, and you can't defeat it. So you keep going over and over again. The same cycle repeats itself. Now you're actively looking for Christians to get into fights with in order to get that splinter in your mind to stop driving you mad. What's the solution? Well, that's why I'm here. That is my gift to you. I have the solution. The first step to that solution is the first step that an addict has to have. What's the first step in ending an addiction is, first of all, acknowledging that the problem exists and what the problem is. And you have to do the same thing. The first step, Mr. or Miss Atheist, in being free is acknowledging who your fight really is against. And it's not against Christians. It's not against God or the Bible or churches or anything else. Nope. Your fight is against your own mind. So that's step number 1. Stop fighting Christians. It's not going to help you. You know this. You've done it for weeks, months, years, maybe your entire life, and it's never satisfied you. You're still angry and miserable and depressed, fighting against the God that you claim you don't even believe is real. You know it's not working. So just stop doing it. We're not your enemy. Your enemy is your own mind. So understand that. That's step number 1. Is understanding who your fight is against. Your fight is against your own unconscious. So how do you fight your unconscious? Well, the problem is you can't. It's bigger than you. It's 9 times bigger than you. You cannot beat your unconscious mind. the best thing to do is to get into agreement with your unconscious mind. That is how you can do it. And then there are three ways to handle this. One way will completely free you. It is the best way to do it. And if you do number one, you will be completely free, and that will be a great gift to you. Number two is partial. It'll make your that splinter in your mind die down some. It won't completely go away, but it'll at least make it manageable. But it also involves agreeing with your unconscious mind. The third way, which is unfortunately, I believe, the way that most of you are going to react, that third way, well, we'll get into that in a bit. Okay. Way number one is the easiest and most direct way to do it. Just agree with your unconscious mind. Your unconscious mind is trying to convince you of reality. The reality is that evolution is ludicrous. It's impossible. It's ridiculous. Agree with your mind. Agree with your unconscious mind. Agree with the reality that evolution is ludicrous, that it's not real, and that the world is a result of supernatural creation, which will eventually lead you to belief in the true God of the universe, the creator of this universe. And not only will it subside that itching in your brain, that splinter in your mind, you actually might get saved and spend eternity with the God who created you. Now, it's not easy. It's going to involve you getting rid of your pride, which, again, not easy for any of us to do, but it is the one sure cure. Why? Because your unconscious wants you to see reality. The reality is that our universe had to become into existence through supernatural creation. You agree with that, then instantly that splinter in your mind goes away because your unconscious says, great, you finally see reality. I will stop nudging you towards it. I will stop poking you. So that's the way number one. But again, that's probably the least likely thing you're going to do, but it's the most effective. That's your 100% cure and 100% freedom. Number two is the partial freedom. And that would be following in the footsteps of the person we talked about in the last episode. His name is George Wald. He was a Nobel Prize winning scientist, and he had a famous quote where he said, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, and basically he said, we know that evolution is impossible scientifically. However, the alternative to that is believing in supernatural creation. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to be accountable to a God or gods. Therefore, we choose to believe what's impossible. And that's number two. You agree with your unconscious brain. You tell them, yes, I know that evolution is not real. I know that it can't be. However, I choose to believe it anyway. Now, that will relieve some of the tension and give you some freedom because you are in agreement. You will agree with your unconscious mind that it's not reality, but you tell your unconscious that I will still consciously believe in it, even though I know it's not real. So that will bring things down a bit because at least you're being honest. At least you are honestly admitting that you believe in a ridiculous fairy tale, but you choose to believe it. And so you'll still be uncomfortable because your unconscious mind won't be fully satisfied, but you will at least have some release, some freedom, some satisfaction of your unconscious because at least you're honest enough to admit that it's not real, and you're just choosing to live in a lie, and your unconscious will adjust to it. You'll still be uncomfortable, but not nearly as uncomfortable. Okay. What is number three? Number three is, well, basically keep doing what you're doing. Keep believing in evolution. Keep believing that it's true, even though it's not, even though you know it's not. Just keep on believing it. Don't acknowledge that it's not true. Don't change. Keep doing what you're doing now, which is trolling Christian sites and getting into fights with us and having complete dissatisfaction. Wait, but how is that a solution? Well, you see, number three is not so much a gift as it is a dirty trick. You see, I got to admit, I just played a really dirty trick on you. How is that? Because, as I said, your unconscious brain believes in you. It believes in your innocence. And so it's gently poking you, gently but consistently poking you, trying to nudge you in the right way to reality. However, as if listening to the last two episodes, you no longer have that excuse. You know reality. You know that this is an impossible fairy tale. And you know that your fight isn't against Christians and your fight is against your unconscious brain. And that if you continue to get into fights with Christians, you're not doing it innocently. So now your unconscious brain knows that you know, and it knows that you're no longer innocent. So what is it going to do? Well, it's no longer going to give you that benefit of the doubt, that gentle poking, that nudge, that irritation that you used to get. Well, guess what? It's going to stop being a poke and it's going to start being a punch. Your unconscious brain still wants you to see reality, but it knows that you are intentionally not seeking it. It doesn't believe you're innocent anymore. So it's going to ramp things up significantly. As miserable and irritable as you are now, it's going to get much, much worse. You are going to become mentally distressed. You're going to become even more depressed. You're going to become even more irritable and agitated. And every time you continue to promote and believe what you know is not true, and every time you refuse to take any of the solutions that I gave you, your unconscious knows. Your unconscious has been listening to everything I've been saying, and it's looking to you now to see if you are going to actually acknowledge it. And if you will not acknowledge it, and you're going to continue to operate in this falsehood, then it knows that it needs to make things more difficult on you, and it's going to make you extraordinarily miserable until you are curled up in a ball, rocking back and forth. It's going to just make your life horrible until you finally admit that evolution is a farce and that you shouldn't believe it anymore. And until you do that, your life is going to get worse. And that is my gift to you. You're welcome. All right. Thank you for listening and watching. I appreciate it. Please feel free to like, subscribe, do all the other things, hit all the buttons, subscribe and like and share and do all sorts of things. Go to faithbyreason.net, become a member, and you get access to the Revelation series and all the other content that's behind the paywall. You can also go to patreon.com/faithbyreason, become a patron, and you get first access to content. You get the Q&As, you get the exclusive bonus episodes, and you can also be a part of my monthly Bible study. And we will continue our Revelation series next month, where we start talking about the two trees in the Garden of Eden. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil gets a lot of the attention, but we're also going to spend a lot of time talking about the tree of life, which is just as important, if not more important, than that tree. And again, atheists, sorry, not sorry. Enjoy your gift. All right, talk to you next time.